Good day. Welcome to another session of Fog Accountancy Tutorials. Today we are going to continue our study on variance analysis and we are going to look at a very simple question relatively. And then we are going to look at how to calculate for the material cost variances and for the labor cost variances. And so without wasting much time, I want us to pick the question and then try and explain how to solve for them. Okay. Information extracted from the books of Coleco Limited shows the standard cost of producing a unit of kabuki soap as follows. Materials 6 kilograms at 20 cedis for 120 cedis in total. We have labor 12 hours at 15 cedis, making 180 cedis in total. Variable overhead 12 hours at 10 cedis, giving us 120 cedis. So the standard variable cost per unit is 420. Now let's continue reading. For the month of November 2014, 600 units of kabuki soap was produced. Actual material bought and used were 3,200 kilograms at a cost of 72,320 Ghana cedis. Actual hours worked was 7,000 hours at a cost of 118,500 cedis. You are required to calculate for the following variances. A. Total material cost variance. B. Materials price variance. C. Materials usage variance. And then the D is total labor cost variance. And then we calculate for labor rates variance and then labor efficiency variance. So these are the requirements that we are supposed to work for. Okay, so when you get a question like this, your responsibility is to first of all identify the elements that you are going to use in your formulas. Remember that to calculate for material cost variances and the labor cost variances, you would need your price and your quantity, both the standard and then the actuals for both price and quantity used. And then we also need our actual hours and our standard hours for the labor, and then the standard rate and the actual rate. And so I know most of the time the difficulty for students is to identify these various elements that I'm talking about. And so I'm going to show you a simple way that you are going to go about this. So first of all, when you get a question like this is what you must do. You should write. Still, I'm going to permit me to use, okay, let me start with the materials aspect. So with the materials, we are going to need your standard price. Permit me to use SP for standard price. And then I'll need my actual price as well, or my standard quantity, sorry. And then I'll also need my actual price for the material and then the actual quantity for the materials. When I come to labor, under labor, I'll need my standard rate and then my standard hours for the labor. And then I'll also need my actual rate and then the actual hours. So it is always important that you do an outline like this before you start your solution. And then you go into the question. Make sure you've been able to identify all these elements from the question. If you're able to identify all these elements from the question, the rest is just a formula work and it's very easy to do. And so the difficulty is to identify each of these things. And so that is what we are going to do now. We are going to go back to the question and then we'll try to identify the standard price, standard quantity, actual price, actual quantity for materials. And then under labor, we'll try and identify standard rate, the standard hours, actual rate, and the actual hours. These are the basic information that we need to be able to solve with the formulas. And so going back to the question, whatever the information that we have given first is the standard cost card of the product kabuki. We are told that the company made this standard that they are going to use for each unit of kabuki that they will produce. They are going to use 6 kilograms of materials and then each material is expected to cost 20 cedis, and that is going to give us 120 cedis for the unit. And so for the standard, we could see that the standard price of materials is 20 cedis, and for labor they will need 12 hours of labor for 1 unit of the product, and each hour is going to be paid at a rate of 15 cedis. That is the standard. So they are going to need a standard rate. The standard rate, sorry, is also going to be 15 cedis. And so when we come here, we'll know that for the standard, our standard price for materials is 20, and then our standard rate for labor is 15 cedis. So this has already been established. Now let me draw our attention to something very important, that when it comes to the prices and the rates, we need them per unit all the time. You should make sure that the standard price, the actual price, standard rate, actual rate, the money involved should always be per unit. But when it comes to the quantity and the hours, we don't need them per unit. We need them in bulk. I'm sure that will help you. I repeat that again. I'm saying that when it comes to the hours and the quantity, we get them in bulk for the calculations. But when it comes to the money involved, the rates and the prices, we need that per unit. And it means that if you are going through a question like this and the hours are given to you per unit of a product, you convert that into a bulk or a whole quantity that is produced. If the materials are given to you per unit, we need that in bulk. But if the price is given per unit, you pick it as it is. If the rate is given per unit, you pick it as it is. Now, if the prices were given at a total cost, you convert them into per unit. So watch what I'm going to do. We've gotten our standard price at 20 cedis and our standard rate at 15 cedis. Now, look at the materials. We are told that for the standard product, we need 6 kilograms of materials. That is for a standard. But remember that these 6 kilograms of materials that we need is per unit. And I told you that we don't need per unit for the quantity. We need it in bulk. And so down there, we are told that for the month of November 2014, 600 units of the kabuki soap was produced. And so to get the 6 kilograms of the standard for the whole production, you need to multiply that 6 kilogram per unit by the total number of units produced. And so all the time, the total number of units that is produced actually is our yardstick for calculating for the quantity and then the standard hours. And so for 6 kilogram per unit, if 600 units were produced, then it means that our standard quantity will be 6 kg multiplied by 600 units. And that is going to give us 3,600 kg. And so our standard quantity for the materials is 3,600. That is how it's going to be done. You multiply the standard quantity per unit by the actual production that was made. And then we move to the labor. We are told that we need 12 hours per unit for the labor. And so 12 hours for each unit. If 600 units were produced, then we need to multiply these 12 hours by the same 600 units. And so under labor, standard hours will be 12 hours multiplied by the same 600 units. 12 hours by 600. And that is going to give us 7,200 hours. And so that is how we arrive at the standard hours. Remember that I told you that for this, we are done with the standards, but remember that I told you that we need the prices and the rates per unit, but we need the quantity and the hours in bulk. And how do you get that in bulk? You multiply that by the actual units produced. Okay, so we are done with both the standard for materials and the standard for labor. Let us look at the actuals. Now we are told for the month of November 2014, 600 units of kabuki soap was produced. Actual materials bought and used were 3,200 kilograms at a cost of 72,320. So it was the actual materials used in quantity 3,200 kilograms. So as for that one, it has been given to us in bulk already, 3,200 kg. So we need the actual price, but we were not given the actual price. What we were told is that this total number of units, kg that was used for the materials was bought at a total cost of 72,320. We don't need that total cost. We only need the unit price for the actual, because I told you the prices should be given in units. And because we don't know, we have been given the quantity that was bought and the total cost. What we have to do is to divide the total cost of 72,320. We divide that by the quantity that was bought, and that will give us the price per quantity or kg. And so actual price is going to be calculated as 72,320 divided by 3,200 kg. That is how we are going to arrive at our actual price. And that is going to give us 22 cedis, 60 pesos. So that is how we arrive at the actual price. Please remember that anytime you get a question, I advise that do this first before you come onto the formulas. Other than that, you quote the formulas and you'll be stuck. You will not know which figure to pick to put in the formulas. So when you do this, you may not even need to come back to the question. All you do will be picking your figures from what you have done into the formulas, and then you score your correct marks. Okay, so we come back to the labor as well. Now with the labor, the actuals for the labor, we are also told that actual hours worked was 7,000 hours at a cost of 108,500. So we are told that the actual hours are 7,000 hours. It was already given to us in bulk, so we don't need to multiply. If it was given per unit, we would have multiplied by the same 600 that was produced. Now when we come to the actual rate, we're not giving the actual rate per unit. We're giving the total cost of 108,500, and so we will divide 108,500 by the hours of 7,000, and that is going to give us the rate per hour, which is 15 cedis, 50 pesos. And so that is how we get the actual rate. We divide the total cost by the hours that incurred the cost, and it's going to give us the rate per hour. And so we are done with what I said is very important outline. So your job is to find all these elements. If there was a variable overhead requirement in the question, we would have done same for variable overhead to find the hours involved and then the rates involved. And still, the rates would have been per unit, but the hours would have been in bulk quantity. And so having been able to establish this, we can confidently go onto our formulas, and then we'll try to calculate for each of them. So we begin with the material variances. We are asked to calculate for total material cost variance. And the formula permits me to use the shortcuts, but even though when you want to use these shortcuts in the exam, you have to define them. Okay, so it's our standard price times our standard quantity minus the actual price times the actual quantity. And so your job is to put in what you have in the formulas. Our standard price is 20 cedis. Our standard quantity is 3,600 kg minus our actual price, which is 22 cedis, 60 pesos, times the actual quantity of 3,200 kg. And so we'll multiply this, and then we'll subtract this from the answer. And so we have 72,000 Ghana cedis minus 72,320. So that is what we have. And so our final answer will be 320, which is an adverse variance. So this is an adverse variance of 320 Ghana cedis because the standard was less, the actual was more than the standard, and so it's not a favorable variance, it's an adverse variance. So that is how we arrive at the total material cost variance. As a matter of fact, the main job is for you to get these figures down. Once you get them down, you know the formula, you are good to go. All right, so you are supposed to calculate for the direct material price variance. So direct material price variance. Over here, the focus is on price. And so the formula, standard price minus actual price in the bracket, and is valued at your actual quantity. So this is how we find the direct material price variance. Actual quantity was known to be 3,200 kg, multiplying the standard price of 20 cedis minus the actual price of 22 cedis, 60 pesos. And so when you subtract, you could see that the actual price was more than the standard price. And so 3,200 kg will be multiplying an adverse variance of 2 cedis, 60 pesos. And that will give the overall variance of 8,320. And this is also an adverse variance because the actual price was more than the standard price. We incurred more than we expected, and therefore this will give us an adverse price variance. Okay, then we move on to find for the usage or the quantity variance for materials. And so our direct material usage or quantity variance, the formula is also given by your standard quantity minus your actual quantity in bracket valued at your standard price. And so once you know the formulas, all you need to do is to put in your figures. The standard price from what we established is 20 cedis, and then your standard quantity was established as 3,600 kg, and your actual quantity is 3,200 kg. So you could see that there is a positive variance with the quantity. We use less than our expectation, and so we value that at our 20 cedis, and it's going to be multiplied by the variance in quantity of 100 kg, and that is going to give us a final answer of 8,000 cedis, and this is favorable, F. So we are getting a favorable variance for the usage. And so this is what we do. We have to do a reconciliation of these three variances. Remember that your material usage variance plus your material price variance should give you the material cost variance. That is how it's supposed to be reconciled. And so we will see that a positive of 8,000 plus a negative of 8,320 should give us a negative of 320. And so it tells us that whatever calculation that we have made is accurate, and then we are done. Okay. Our next job is to calculate for the labor variances. And just like we did for the material variances, we are going to do for the labor variances as well. And so we'll start with the total labor cost variance. And the formula is given as standard rate times your standard hours, or minus your actual rate multiplying your actual hours. And so I told you that once you have this information, you don't have any problem. You just come here. You don't need to go back to the question. You have every information that you need. Your standard rate is 15 cedis. Your standard hours is 7,200 hours. And then your actual rate is 15 cedis, 50 pesos. And then your actual hours is given as 7,000 hours. And so when we multiply that, we have 108,000. And then we subtract that from this, the product of 15.5 and 7,000. And that gives us 108,500. And so we are going to get a variance of 500 cedis, which is an adverse variance because our standard cost is less than the actual cost, and so we are incurring more than necessary. So that is not a favorable variance, it's an adverse one. And then we move to the next variance, which is direct labor rate variance. The rate of pay variance. So here, the emphasis is on the rate. And so in the bracket will be your standard rate minus your actual rate, because that is where there is emphasis, and it is valued at your actual hours. And so the same way you have the figures here, actual hours, 7,000 hours, multiplying a standard rate of 15 cedis minus the actual rate of 15 cedis, 50 pesos. And so you are going to have the variance to be 7,000 hours times 50 pesos, 0.5 cedis. And that is going to give us 3,500 Ghana cedis. And that is an adverse variance. An adverse variance because the actual rate was more than the standard rate. So it is what is in the bracket that we use to determine whether it is favorable or adverse. And in the bracket, we realize that we incurred more in terms of rate than what we plan to incur. And then finally, we'll look at the direct labor efficiency variance. Efficiency variance is hours. We want to look at how we're able to use few hours to produce. And so once the focus is on efficiency, it's your standard hours minus your actual hours in bracket valued at your standard rate. That is the formula. And so our standard rate per what we just did is 15 cedis from the question. And your standard hours, 7,200 hours. And then your actual hours is 7,000 hours. So once the focus is on the hours, then we can tell that in the bracket, it's a favorable variance because we use less hours than our expectation. And so the variance is going to be 15 cedis multiplying an excess of 200 hours. And that is going to give us 3,000 Ghana cedis favorable variance. And just like we did for the material, we have to check our accuracy. This efficiency variance plus our rate variance should be equal to the cost variance. And so we are having a 3,000 positive, 3,500 negative. When we add them, it's going to give us a 500 negative or adverse variance. And that means that whatever we have done is correct. Ladies and gentlemen, you see, variance analysis is very simple. We just have to establish this first. I always tell my students, this is the most important part of the question. Whenever you get a question, you have to establish the standard and the actual for both price and quantity, that is for materials. If it is labor, you look for your standard rate and your actual rate, standard hours and actual hours. If it is overheads, it's also rate and hours. Make sure you are listing them first in the answer booklet. And once you're able to do this as your workings, the formula is easy to memorize, and so it becomes easier to find your variances. And I can assure you that you reduce your errors, or you will not even make them at all as far as variance analysis calculations are concerned. This is where I want to end you for today. In our next video, we'll still continue with variance analysis, and I'm going to go into the variable overhead variances and the fixed overhead variances as well. And then we'll move to revenue variances, and then we'll be going deeper and deeper into variance analysis. I just want us to take it one at a time, and I want you to build up your confidence, and then we'll all make it together. Remember to subscribe to the channel. It's very, very important. Share this video, comment, let us know how you have been helped, and then that will also motivate us to continue to help you. Until we meet again another time, it's bye for now.